The first time the galaxy heard from Earth, it was not through diplomacy or peaceful exploration. It was through blood, steel, and the kind of desperate fury that only comes when someone threatens what humans hold dear. Commander Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display with eyes that had seen too much war. The distress signal from the mining colony of New Geneva had been broadcasting for 72 hours straight. 72 hours of automated pleas for help growing weaker with each transmission. The raiders had hit them hard, and they were running out of time. "Ma'am, we're receiving multiple contacts on long-range sensors," reported Lieutenant from the sensor station. His young face was pale, but his voice remained steady. "Looks like a full battle group, 12 heavy cruisers, at least 30 destroyers, and—" He paused, swallowing hard, 3 dreadnoughts. Felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. The Retribution was fast, heavily armed for her size, but she was just one ship. One human ship against an alien armada that had been terrorizing the outer colonies for months. The smart play would be to retreat, call for reinforcements, and come back with a proper fleet. But humans had never been particularly smart when their people were dying. "Time to New Geneva?" she asked, her voice cutting through the bridge chatter like a blade. "At maximum burn, 18 hours, came the reply from navigation. "The colony won't last 18 hours, muttered Doctor from the medical station. The ship's chief medical officer rarely spoke during tactical briefings, but when he did, people listened. "The last transmission mentioned critical life support failures. They've got maybe 6 hours of air left." Studied the tactical display again. They were known for their methodical approach to warfare. They would strip a colony of everything valuable, then sell the survivors into slavery. It was efficient, profitable, and completely without honor. The galaxy had learned to accept it as the way of things. Pirates were pirates, after all, and the universe was a big place. But the galaxy had never dealt with humans before. "What do we know about battle doctrine?" asked. The young officer consulted his tactical manual, one of the few comprehensive guides to alien warfare that Earth's intelligence services had managed to compile. "They prefer overwhelming force, ma'am. Standard formation is a defensive sphere with the dreadnoughts at the center and screening units in overlapping fields of fire. They're methodical, disciplined, and they don't take unnecessary risks." "Which means they won't expect a single ship to attack them head-on," mused. She turned to her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named who had cut his teeth fighting corporate security forces in the Belt Wars. "What's our torpedo?" 48 Mark VII plasma torpedoes, ma'am, plus the usual complement of missiles and point defense systems. Nodded slowly. The Mark VII was the latest in human military technology, a fusion-powered warhead capable of punching through the heaviest armor. Each torpedo carried the destructive power of a small nuclear device, and the Retribution carried enough firepower to level a small moon. But 48 torpedoes against an entire battle group. It should have been suicide. "Ma'am," spoke up hesitantly, "are we really going to attack? I mean, it's just us against all of them." Turned to look at her bridge crew, these young men and women who had volunteered to serve in humanity's first real military force. They were scared, she could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy hadn't learned yet. When push came to shove, when people they cared about were in danger, humans didn't calculate odds. They fought. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're engaging the enemy to buy time for reinforcements. Include all tactical data on formations and capabilities." "Yes, ma'am. Should I request immediate backup?" Shook her head. "By the time backup arrives, New Geneva will be a graveyard. We're going in alone." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Outside the viewports, the stars wheeled slowly as the Retribution adjusted course toward the New Geneva system, toward a battle that every military manual said they couldn't win. "I want you to prepare a special firing solution. We're going to hit them with everything we have all at once. No warnings, no demands for surrender. The moment we drop out of hyperspace, I want every torpedo tube loaded and ready to fire." "Ma'am, if we fire our entire at once, we'll be defenseless afterward." "There won't be an afterward if we don't make this first strike count." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather instead of planning what amounted to a suicide mission. "The fight like accountants, everything calculated, everything measured. They'll expect us to probe their defenses, test their formations, maybe try to draw off some of their ships. What they won't expect, added Doctor quietly, is for someone to charge straight into their formation and start shooting. Smiled grimly. Exactly. We're going to teach the galaxy something about humans today. We don't retreat when our people are in danger. We don't calculate acceptable losses when children are dying. And we sure as hell don't let alien pirates think they can prey on human colonies without consequences. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. The crew worked with the efficiency that came from months of training and the desperation that came from knowing they might not live to see another day. Weapons were charged, armor was sealed, and emergency protocols were reviewed one final time. As they approached the edge of the new Geneva system, found herself thinking about the colony. 15,000 people, mostly families who had signed up for a new life among the stars. Engineers, farmers, teachers, children. People who had never hurt anyone, who just wanted to build something better for themselves and their families. They had picked the wrong species to prey upon. Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced the navigator. Settled into her command chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 30 seconds, we're going to drop into a system occupied by hostile forces. Our mission is simple. Protect the innocent and make the enemy pay for every life they've taken. Today, the galaxy is going to learn what it means to threaten humans. Today, we show them what we're made of. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed around them, and the Retribution burst back into normal space like an avenging angel. Ahead of them, the battle group hung in space like a cluster of deadly thorns, their ships dark and predatory against the contacts confirmed, reported. Full battle group as expected there. They're not moving, ma'am. I think we caught them by surprise. Smile was sharp as a blade. That's the last mistake they'll ever make. Fire everything. All tubes, all missiles. I want every torpedo we have in space in the next 10 seconds. The Retribution shuddered as her torpedo bays opened and unleashed hell upon the galaxy. The space around New Geneva erupted into a light show that would have been beautiful if it hadn't been so deadly. 48 plasma torpedoes streaked across the void like falling stars, their fusion engines leaving brilliant trails of superheated gas in their wake. The battle group, caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of a human warship, scrambled to respond. Admiral Hal watched from the command bridge of his flagship, the Terror of Worlds, as his sensors struggled to make sense of what was happening. One moment his fleet had been methodically stripping the human colony of its resources, and the next moment the void around them was filled with incoming death. Evasive maneuvers, he barked, his 3 pairs of eyes tracking the torpedo swarm on the tactical display. All ships, defensive formation 7, point defense systems to maximum. But they had never faced human weapons before. The Mark VII plasma torpedoes didn't behave like the conventional missiles they were used to intercepting. These weapons were smart, adaptive, and they learned from every point defense laser that tried to stop them. The first torpedo struck the destroyer Bone Crusher amidships, its plasma warhead detonating with the force of a small star. The alien ship simply vaporized, its hull turning to superheated gas in the blink of an eye. The second and third torpedoes found the heavy cruiser Night Terror, punching through its armored hull and detonating inside its reactor compartment. The ship died in a brilliant flash that lit up half the system. "By the gods," whispered Commander from the sensor station, "what kind of weapons are these?" Hal had been raiding and pillaging for over 2 decades, and he had never seen anything like this. The human torpedoes moved like living things, dodging point defense fire and coordinating their attacks with an intelligence that should have been impossible. Worse, they seemed to be learning from each interception attempt, adapting their flight patterns to counter defensive measures. Within 30 seconds, 6 ships were gone. Not damaged, not disabled, gone. Turned into expanding clouds of plasma and debris that painted the space around the fleet with the remains of their crews. "Sir, the human ship is closing fast," reported the tactical officer. "She's not slowing down, I think. I think she's going to ram us." Aboard the Retribution, Commander watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The torpedo barrage had been even more effective than she had hoped, but it was just the opening move. Now came the hard part. "All power to forward shields," she ordered. "Prepare the rail guns for close-range engagement. Plot a course straight through their formation. I want to split them up, make it harder for them to coordinate their defense. Ma'am, that's insane, protested. We'll be taking fire from every ship in the fleet. Good, replied coldly. The more they're shooting at us, the less attention they're paying to the colony. How long until life support fails on New Geneva? Doctor checked his displays. 4 hours, 17 minutes. Then we hold them for 4 hours and 17 minutes, no matter what it takes. The Retribution plowed into the formation like a battering ram, her rail guns spitting streams of projectiles at anything that moved. The human ship was smaller and faster than anything in the alien fleet, darting between the massive dreadnoughts like a terrier among elephants. Her shields flared and sparked under the combined fire of dozens of enemy weapons, but she kept moving, kept fighting, kept dealing death to anyone who stood in her way. Direct hit on the cruiser's Soul Render, reported. Her main reactor is going critical. Another destroyer down port side, added. Wait, I'm getting communications from the colony. They're trying to reach us. Activated the comm channel, and the bridge filled with the voice of Colonel Martinez, the ranking military officer on New Geneva. His transmission was weak and broken with static, but his words were clear enough. Retribution, this is New Geneva Actual. We see you up there, and we want you to know that every person on this rock is watching. You magnificent bastards are giving those alien pirates hell, and we couldn't be prouder to call ourselves human right now. The bridge crew exchanged looks and felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with tactical victories or strategic objectives. This was about more than military doctrine or political advantage. This was about family, about the bonds that tied humans together across the vast emptiness of space. New Geneva, this is Commander. We're not going anywhere. Hold tight down there. Copy that, Retribution. For what it's worth, we're not planning on dying quietly. The colonists have been building improvised weapons and fortifications for the past 3 days. If any of those alien bastards make it to the surface, we'll make them pay for every step. Smile was fierce. That's the spirit out. She turned back to the tactical display, where the battle was reaching a crescendo of violence. The Retribution had taken severe damage, her hull by laser fire and her shields down to 30%. But she had also taken a terrible toll on the fleet. 12 ships destroyed, another 6 damaged and falling behind the main formation. Ma'am, reported grimly, we're down to conventional missiles. The railgun ammunition is running low, and our reactor is showing stress fractures from combat overload. How long can we keep this up? Maybe another hour before we lose main power. Looked at the chronometer on her display. 3 hours and 42 minutes until New Geneva's life support failed. They needed more time, and there was only one way to get it. All hands, this is the captain. We're going to do something that's never been tried before. We're going to ram one of their dreadnoughts. The bridge went silent. Ramming attacks were theoretically possible, but they were also suicidal. No one had ever tried to deliberately crash one warship into another at combat speeds. Ma'am, Doctor said quietly, that will kill us all. Maybe, acknowledged. But it will also take out their flagship and throw their whole formation into chaos. The rest of their fleet will be so busy trying to reorganize that they won't have time to finish stripping the colony. It might buy New Geneva the time they need for reinforcements to arrive. She looked around the bridge at her crew, these young people who had trusted her to lead them into battle. I won't order anyone to stay. The escape pods are ready, and you can reach minimum safe distance before impact. Was the first to speak. Ma'am, with respect, you can go to hell if you think I'm abandoning ship now. We came here to fight, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Nodded agreement. The helm is yours, Captain. Just tell us which dreadnought you want to hit. Doctor sighed and began strapping himself into his crash restraints. Well, this should be interesting from a medical standpoint. I've never treated someone who's been through a starship collision before. Felt a surge of emotion that she quickly suppressed. There would be time for sentiment later if any of them survived what came next. Set course for the Terror of Worlds, that big ugly ship in the center of their formation. I want every remaining missile targeted on their engines. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. The Retribution turned toward the alien flagship like a guided missile, her engines howling as they pushed the damaged ship to her maximum speed. Behind her, the wreckage of 2 fleets painted the space around New Geneva with fire and twisted metal. The galaxy was learning about humans, and the lesson was written in blood and defiance among the stars. Admiral Hal watched in growing horror as the human ship turned toward his flagship with obvious intent. The Terror of Worlds was 3 times the size of the human vessel, heavily armored and bristling with weapons, but there was something terrifying about the smaller ship's unwavering approach. The humans weren't trying to escape or outmaneuver his fleet. They were coming straight at him, and they clearly didn't care about the consequences. "All batteries concentrate fire on that human ship," he roared. "Destroy it before it reaches us." The space between the 2 ships erupted with laser fire, plasma bolts, and missile trails as every weapon on the Terror of Worlds opened up. The Retribution's shields collapsed under the barrage, and her hull began to glow cherry red from the intense heat. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches, creating a glittering cloud of ice crystals around the damaged ship. But still she came on. On the Retribution's bridge, chaos reigned. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, emergency lights flickered in the smoke-filled air, and the deck plates groaned under the stress of combat damage. Commander gripped her command chair as the ship bucked and shuddered around her. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported, his voice barely audible over the screaming of tortured metal. "Emergency bulkheads are sealed, but we're losing atmosphere fast." "Engineering reports reactor output at 120%, added. "The containment field is starting to fluctuate." Watch the tactical display as the distance to the enemy flagship closed. 5 kilometers. 4. 3. The Terror of Worlds loomed ahead like a metal mountain, its hull studded with weapon emplacements that continued to pour fire into the approaching human ship. "All remaining missiles fire," ordered. "Target their engines and bridge." The Retribution's last 6 missiles streaked toward the dreadnought, weaving through the defensive fire with the same uncanny intelligence that had characterized the plasma torpedoes. 3 found their mark, detonating against the alien ship's engine compartments in brilliant flashes of destructive energy. But it wasn't enough to stop what came next. The Retribution struck the Terror of Worlds at a relative velocity of nearly 8,000 kilometers per hour. The impact was like a small asteroid hitting a mountainside. The human ship's reinforced prow punched through the dreadnought's armor plating like paper, her momentum carrying her deep into the alien vessel's hull. The explosion that followed lit up half the star system. Both ships died together, their reactors overloading simultaneously and feeding off each other in a cascade of nuclear fire. The Terror of Worlds broke apart like a toy hit by a hammer, her massive hull splitting into 3 burning sections that tumbled away into space. The Retribution simply ceased to exist, her sacrifice measured in megatons, and the sudden silence that fell over the fleet. For a long moment, the remaining alien ships hung motionless in space, their crews stunned by the sheer audacity of what they had just witnessed. No one in the galaxy fought like that. No one threw away their lives so casually, so completely, for strangers they had never met. The silence was broken by a communication from the surface of New Geneva. Colonel Martinez's voice crackled across every frequency, reaching not just the fleet but every ship within a dozen light years. "This is New Geneva to any forces still in this system. You just saw what happens when you threaten human civilians. 1 ship, 1 crew, and they took out half your fleet before you could blink. You want to know what's coming next." Down on the colony's surface, Martinez stood in the improvised command center that the colonists had built in the past 3 days. Around him, 15,000 people watched the displays showing the battle overhead. Farmers, engineers, teachers, children, ordinary people who had found something extraordinary within themselves when the moment demanded it. "Our reinforcements are already on the way," Martinez continued, his voice carrying across space like a promise of retribution. 3 human battle groups, 60 ships, and they're all coming here. You've got maybe 6 hours before they arrive, and when they do, they're going to want answers for what you tried to do to us." On the bridge of the cruiser Dark Harvest, Captain stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human fleet was indeed approaching, their signatures burning bright on long-range sensors. More than that, sensor contacts throughout the sector were changing course, converging on New Geneva like antibodies rushing to fight an infection. "Sir," his communications officer reported nervously, "we're receiving transmissions from human ships throughout the sector. Military vessels, merchant ships, even civilian transports. They're all heading here." Felt a chill run through his body. In 30 years of raiding, he had never encountered anything like this. Most species considered their military and civilian populations to be separate entities. The military fought, the civilians cowered, and life went on. But the humans seemed to view any attack on their civilians as an attack on all of them. "What are they saying in these transmissions?" he asked. The communications officer's mandibles clicked nervously. They're angry, sir, very angry, and they keep using phrases I don't understand. Things like remember the retribution and no quarter for alien pirates. I think they're coming here to fight us." Admiral Hal was dead, vaporized along with his flagship and his grand ambitions of easy plunder. That left in command of what remained of the fleet, and he was beginning to understand why the other species in this part of the galaxy had given humans such a wide berth. "Status of the colony?" he asked. "Still transmitting, sir. Their life support is failing, but they're using the delay to evacuate non-essential personnel to underground shelters. They're also building weapons, sir. Improvised explosives, projectile weapons, even some kind of chemical weapons made from industrial equipment." His worst fears were being confirmed. The humans weren't just going to lie down and die. They were going to fight, tooth and claw, until the very end. And when their reinforcements arrived, they were going to want blood for blood. "Sir," the tactical officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the human battle group. They're demanding our immediate surrender and the return of all stolen goods and prisoners." "Surrender?" laughed bitterly. "To a species that just demonstrated they'll ram dreadnoughts rather than retreat? I don't think so." But as he looked at the tactical display, counting the approaching human ships and comparing them to his own battered fleet, began to realize that surrender might not be an option. The humans weren't offering terms or negotiations. They were offering a choice: surrender now or be destroyed later. Either way, the age of easy raiding in human space was over. "All ships," he broadcast to his remaining fleet, "prepare for immediate departure. We're leaving this system." "Sir, what about the colony? We haven't finished stripping their resources." Hal looked at the display one more time, where the expanding debris field from the Terror of Worlds continued to glow with residual radiation. "The colony stays. We've learned something here today, something that's going to change how the galaxy sees these humans. They don't fight like other species. They don't calculate acceptable losses or weigh the cost of victory." He paused, thinking of the single human ship that had charged into an entire fleet without hesitation, without fear, without hope of survival. They fight like they have nothing left to lose and everything to protect. That makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. As the surviving ships limped away from New Geneva, word of the battle began to spread through the galactic communication networks. Within hours, every species within 50 light-years knew about the human ship that had faced impossible odds and taken half an alien fleet with her when she died. The galaxy was learning about humanity, and the first lesson was written in the wreckage of the Terror of Worlds. When you threaten human civilians, humans don't negotiate. They fight. The news of New Geneva reached Earth 3 days after the battle, carried by the fastest courier ships in human space. When President Sarah Harrison received the report in her office at the United Earth Defense Council, she read it twice before setting the data pad down with hands that trembled slightly. One ship, one crew, against an entire alien battle fleet. Commander and her people hadn't just died heroes. They had announced humanity's arrival on the galactic stage in letters written with fire and blood. More importantly, they had bought time for the colony to survive and for the truth about the attack to spread throughout known space. "Ma'am," General, the head of Earth's military forces, spoke quietly from across the conference table. "The Galactic Council is requesting an emergency session. They want to discuss recent aggressive actions by human military forces. Apparently, some of the other species are concerned about our response to the attack." Harrison looked up from the report, her expression hard. "Concerned? They attacked a civilian colony and we defended it. What exactly are they concerned about?" "The manner of our defense, ma'am. Word of the ramming attack has spread throughout the galaxy. Some species are calling it barbaric, others are calling it insane. They are claiming that humans are an unstable and dangerous species that poses a threat to galactic peace." Harrison stood and walked to the window overlooking Earth's capital city. Below her, millions of people went about their daily lives, unaware that their species had just announced itself to the galaxy as something to be feared and respected. "General," she said without turning around, How many human colonies have been attacked by pirates in the past year? 14 confirmed attacks, ma'am. The Void Stalkers and at least 3 other raider groups. Total casualties are estimated at over 8,000 civilians. And how many of those attacks received a military response from the galactic authorities? Consulted his data pad. None, ma'am. The Galactic Council's position has been that remote colonies are responsible for their own defense. They've offered to sell us defensive systems, but the prices are, he paused diplomatically, prohibitive. Harrison turned back to face him. So the galaxy was perfectly happy to let human civilians die as long as we did it quietly and didn't fight back. But now that we've shown we're willing to defend ourselves, suddenly we're a threat to galactic peace. That appears to be the situation, yes, ma'am. Then let me make our position clear. Harrison's voice carried the kind of cold authority that had made her one of Earth's most effective political leaders. Schedule a full session of the Galactic Council. I want every species represented, and I want full media coverage. It's time the galaxy understood exactly what kind of neighbors they have in humanity. 1 week later, the Galactic Council chamber on the neutral world of Concord Station was packed with representatives from 47 different species. The massive amphitheater buzzed with nervous conversation as delegates discussed the human crisis in hushed tones. Many had never seen a human before, and President Harrison's arrival caused a stir of whispered commentary. She was smaller than many had expected, dressed in a simple black suit that marked her as a member of a young species with no elaborate ceremonial traditions. But there was something in her bearing, something in the way she moved through the chamber, that made even the most arrogant delegates take notice. Ambassador of the Hegemony called the session to order with a bang of his ceremonial gavel. The Hegemony had been the dominant power in this part of the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and they took their role as mediators very seriously. "We are gathered today," announced in his synthesized voice, "to address concerns about recent actions by the human military forces. The matter before us is whether humanity poses a threat to galactic stability and what measures should be taken to ensure peaceful coexistence." He turned to Harrison. "President Harrison, you have requested the opportunity to address this council. The floor is yours." Harrison stood slowly, her gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. Representatives of species that had been traveling the stars when humans were still learning to make fire. Civilizations that had built vast empires while humanity struggled with basic agriculture. And now they were all looking at her with mixtures of curiosity, concern, and poorly concealed fear. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "I come before you today not to apologize for defending our people, but to make you understand exactly what you're dealing with when you deal with humanity." A ripple of unease passed through the chamber. Most diplomatic speeches at the Galactic Council began with flowery language about cooperation and mutual understanding. 3 weeks ago, the colony of New Geneva was attacked by raiders. 15,000 civilians, including over 3,000 children, were in immediate danger of death or slavery. A single human warship, the UES Retribution, responded to their distress call. She paused, letting the implications sink in. One ship, commanded by a woman named Sarah, crewed by young men and women who knew they were flying into a battle they couldn't win. They could have waited for reinforcements. They could have calculated acceptable losses. They could have followed standard galactic protocol and filed a protest with the appropriate authorities. Harrison's voice hardened. Instead, they charged into an enemy fleet 12 times their size and fought until their ship was nothing but glowing debris. They saved 15,000 lives at the cost of 68 of their own, and they did it without hesitation, without fear, and without hope of survival. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the usually restless Aquarian delegates had stopped their constant chittering. "You call this barbaric," Harrison continued. "You call it insane, you call it a threat to galactic peace. I call it being human." She activated a holographic display that showed the tactical records from the Battle of New Geneva. The assembled delegates watched in fascination and horror as the tiny human ship tore through the formation like an avenging angel. Commander and her crew didn't die because they were violent or unstable. They died because they believed that innocent lives were worth more than their own safety. They died because they understood something that you seem to have forgotten in your 1,000-year peace. Some things are worth fighting for. Ambassador Al of the Confederacy rose to his feet, his mandibles clicking with agitation. This human speaks of innocent lives, but what of the lives lost on our ships? What of the precedent this sets for other young species who might think violence is the solution to every problem? Harrison turned to face him directly. Ambassador, your people attacked a civilian colony. You came to steal, to murder, and to enslave. You brought violence to our worlds, and we responded in kind. If you want to discuss precedent, let's discuss the precedent of leaving human civilians to die while the galaxy watches and does nothing. The delegate sat down heavily, his argument deflated by the simple truth of her words. You want to know what kind of threat humanity represents? Harrison continued, addressing the full chamber again. We are a threat to anyone who thinks civilian populations are acceptable targets. We are a threat to anyone who believes that might makes right. We are a threat to pirates, slavers, and anyone else who preys on the innocent. She gestured to the tactical display, where the image of the Retribution's final charge played in an endless loop. But we are also the greatest ally you could ever have. When the next crisis comes, when some new threat emerges from the darkness between stars, you'll know that humanity will fight. We'll fight for our own people, and we'll fight for yours. We'll fight until our ships are broken and our weapons are empty and our crews are dead, because that's what it means to be human. The chamber erupted into discussion as delegates argued among themselves in dozens of different languages. Some called for sanctions against humanity, others for military action to contain the threat. But many others were thinking about their own vulnerable colonies, their own civilian populations, and what it might mean to have an ally who would die to protect them. Ambassador called for order with his gavel, but the damage was done. The galaxy had heard humanity's message, delivered not in the language of diplomacy, but in the simple, brutal truth of sacrifice and courage. President Harrison gathered her notes and prepared to leave, but Ambassador Tease of the Ethereal Collective called out to her. President Harrison, if I may ask, what does humanity want from the galaxy? What are your terms? Harrison paused at the chamber door and looked back at the assembled delegates one final time. We want what every species wants, to live in peace, to protect our families, and to build something better for our children. But we also want the galaxy to understand that human civilians are not acceptable targets. Attack our people, and we will respond with everything we have. Threaten our colonies, and we will hunt you to the ends of space. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Ambassador. We just want to make sure that anyone who thinks about hurting humans knows exactly what they're getting into. As she left the chamber, the delegates sat in stunned silence, processing what they had just heard. Humanity had announced its presence in the galaxy not with grand declarations or territorial claims, but with a simple promise: we protect our own, no matter the cost. The age of easy prey was over. The warriors of Earth had arrived. 6 months after President Harrison's speech to the Galactic Council, the effects were still rippling across known space. Human colonies that had once been tempting targets for raiders now found themselves left strictly alone. Merchant ships flying under Earth's protection sailed through previously dangerous sectors without interference. The mere possibility of facing human retaliation had proven to be a more effective deterrent than any weapon. But the real test of humanity's resolve was about to come from an unexpected source. Admiral stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, flagship of humanity's Third Fleet, watching the long-range sensors as they painted a picture that should have been impossible. Before her stretched the largest alien armada anyone had ever assembled, over 300 ships representing a dozen different species, all converging on the same point in space. Ma'am, Commander Torres reported from the sensor station, we're receiving a general distress call on all frequencies. It's coming from the hegemony core worlds. Felt her blood turn to ice. The hegemony had ruled this part of the galaxy for over a millennium, their worlds protected by the most advanced technology known to any species. If something was threatening them badly enough to send out a general distress call. What's the nature of the threat? She asked. Torres consulted his displays, his face growing pale as he read the incoming data. It's the Devourers, ma'am. They've returned. Every human on the bridge turned to stare at him. The Devourers were legend, nightmare stories told by the oldest species to frighten their young. An ancient race of machines that had swept across the galaxy eons ago, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but empty space in their wake. They had disappeared so long ago that most species believed them to be myth. Confirmed contacts, Torres continued, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was reporting. 17 Devourer dreadnoughts, over 100 support vessels, and they're heading straight for Hegemony Prime. Current estimates give the planet 72 hours before total planetary consumption begins. Studied the tactical display, where the gathered fleet from across the galaxy was desperately trying to organize itself into some kind of defensive formation. Ships from species that had been enemies for centuries were flying side by side, their ancient grudges forgotten in the face of extinction. "What's Earth's official position on this?" asked Commander Park from the navigation station. "The hegemony hasn't exactly been friendly to us since the New Geneva incident." That was an understatement. The hegemony had been one of the most vocal critics of human military doctrine, calling for restrictions on human expansion and demanding that Earth accept oversight of its military forces. They had painted humanity as dangerous warmongers who threatened galactic stability. Now they were begging for help. "I don't care about politics right now," said firmly. "There are 8 billion civilians on Hegemony Prime, and if the legends about the Devourers are true, they're all going to die unless someone stops those machines." She activated the fleet communication system, addressing not just her own ships, but the entire assembled armada from across the galaxy. "This is Admiral of the Human Third Fleet to all vessels in this system. I know many of you have concerns about working alongside human forces. Some of your governments have called us unstable, aggressive, even barbaric. Today, you're going to find out what those words really mean when applied to the defense of innocent life." The response from the Allied fleet was immediate and varied. Some species welcomed the human reinforcement, others expressed concerns about human tactical doctrine, and a few openly questioned whether humans could be trusted to work as part of a coordinated defense. Admiral of the Hegemony Fleet, a proud being who had never deigned to speak directly to a human before, opened a private channel to the defiance. "Admiral," his synthesized voice crackled across the communication link, "I want to make something clear. This is a hegemony system under hegemony protection. My forces will coordinate the defense, and I expect your ships to follow standard galactic military protocols." Studied the tactical display, where the Devourer fleet was steadily approaching the inner system like a mechanical tide of death. 72 hours to planetary consumption, and the Allied fleet was already wasting time on command structure debates. "Admiral," she replied calmly, "with respect, your standard galactic military protocols have never faced anything like the Devourers. My ships and crews have trained for exactly this kind of impossible fight. If you want to save your world, you'll let us do what we do best." "And what exactly is it that humans do best?" asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "We win," replied simply, "no matter the cost." The next 18 hours proved to be in the differences between human and galactic military thinking. The Allied fleet took defensive positions around Hegemony Prime, their formations textbook perfect, and their coordination flawless. Each ship knew its role, each squadron had clear objectives, and everything was planned down to the smallest detail. The Devourers swept through them like they weren't even there. The ancient machines fought with a precision and ruthlessness that made the raiders look like children. Their weapons could slice through the strongest armor, their sensors could track targets through any jamming, and their tactics were utterly without mercy. Within 6 hours, the Allied fleet had lost nearly a third of its ships without inflicting any meaningful damage on the enemy. "All ships," Admiral's voice came over the communication net, "fall back to defensive formation 7. We need to regroup and analyze their attack patterns." But the human ships didn't fall back. The UES Defiance and her escorts continued to press forward, diving into the midst of the Devourer formation like wolves attacking a pack of bears. Their weapons' fire might not be penetrating the enemy's armor, but they were disrupting their formation and drawing attention away from the retreating Allied forces. His voice was sharp with panic. "What are you doing? I ordered a retreat." "You ordered your ships to retreat," replied, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "My ships are staying to cover your withdrawal." On the Defiance's bridge, the tactical situation looked hopeless. The Devourers were converging on the human formation from all sides, their weapons tearing through shields and armor with mechanical precision. But the crew worked with the same grim determination that had characterized human military forces since the Battle of New Geneva. "Ma'am," Commander Torres reported, "the enemy is focusing their main attack on us. The rest of the fleet is able to reach minimum safe distance." Good nodded. "That's what we're here for. What's our damage report?" "Shields down to 40%, multiple hull breaches on decks 5 through 12. The Valiant has lost her main drive, and the Resolute is down to emergency power only." Looked around her bridge at the young officers who had volunteered to serve in humanity's deep space fleet. They were scared, she could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy still didn't understand. Fear didn't make them retreat, it made them fight harder. "Torres, I want you to plot a ramming course for that lead dreadnought. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as we can." "Ma'am," Commander Park interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the Allied fleet. Admiral wants to know why we're not retreating with the rest of them." Activated the fleet-wide communication channel, ensuring that every ship in the system could hear her response. "This is Admiral to all Allied forces. The human fleet is not retreating because retreat is not an option. Behind us lies a world with 8 billion civilians who are counting on us to stop these machines. My people didn't come here to calculate acceptable losses or debate tactical doctrine. We came here to win." The bridge shuddered as a Devourer plasma beam found its target, but continued speaking as if she were discussing the weather. "6 months ago, the galaxy told us we were too aggressive, too violent, too willing to sacrifice ourselves for others. Today, you're going to see what those qualities really mean when the stakes are ultimate survival." She turned to Torres. "Execute ramming course, all remaining power to forward shields." But before the Defiance could complete her final charge, something unexpected happened. The retreating Allied fleet suddenly reversed course, their ships streaming back toward the battle like a tide turning. Ship after ship dove into the Devourer formation, following the human example of close-range combat and sacrifice. "This is Admiral to all ships," came the voice over the communication net. "The humans are right. We didn't come here to retreat. We came here to save our world." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships from dozens of different species fought side by side, abandoning standard tactical doctrine in favor of the human approach. Get close, hit hard, and never give up. The Devourers found themselves facing an enemy that refused to be intimidated by superior technology or overwhelming odds. The tide of battle turned when captain of the UES Retribution II, named in honor of Commander's ship, discovered the Devourers' weakness. Their ancient armor could deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, but it couldn't handle the exotic matter interactions caused by a ship's hyperspace drive detonating at point-blank range. "All ships," broadcast as his ship dove into the heart of the enemy formation, "target their largest dreadnought. If you've got a hyperspace drive and the courage to use it, follow me in." Within minutes, over 30 ships from across the galaxy were conducting suicide runs against the Devourer fleet, their crews inspired by the human example of ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. The ancient machines, for the first time in eons, found themselves facing an enemy that cared more about victory than survival. When the battle finally ended, the space around Hegemony Prime was filled with debris from both fleets. The Devourers had been stopped, their ancient threat finally ended, but the cost had been terrible. Over half the Allied fleet was gone, including most of the human ships that had led the final assault. Admiral stood on the emergency bridge of the heavily damaged Defiance, looking out at the wreckage-strewn space around them. They had won, but it felt like a hollow victory given the lives lost. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's from the Hegemony High Council." The main screen activated, showing the assembled leaders of the galaxy's oldest civilization. These beings who had ruled for 1,000 years, who had considered themselves superior to every other species, now looked at the human admiral with something approaching reverence. "Admiral," High Counselor Aaron spoke in perfect, unaccented human English. "On behalf of the 8 billion people of Hegemony Prime, and indeed all life in this galaxy, we thank you. Your people have shown us what true courage means." Nodded acknowledgement, but her expression remained serious. "Counselor, my people didn't fight for your thanks. We fought because it was the right thing to do. That's what humans do." "We understand that now," Aaron replied. And we want you to know that the Galactic Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity full membership and a permanent seat on the Security Committee. The galaxy needs protectors like you. Considered this for a moment, then shook her head. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Counselor. We just want to protect the innocent and make sure that anyone who threatens civilian populations knows what they're getting into. She gestured to the debris field around them, where the remains of ships from a dozen species drifted among the wreckage of the ancient enemy. Today, the galaxy learned that humans aren't the only ones willing to fight and die for what's right. Every species here proved they have that same courage when the stakes are high enough. That's the real lesson of this battle. As the transmission ended, Admiral looked out at the stars and thought about Commander and the crew of the original Retribution. They had started something 6 months ago, something that had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. They had shown everyone that some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth any sacrifice necessary. The galaxy was no longer the same place it had been before humans arrived. It was safer, stronger, and filled with species who had remembered what it meant to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And somewhere in the debris field that marked humanity's greatest victory, the spirits of those who had given everything for strangers they would never meet could rest in peace, knowing that their sacrifice had changed the galaxy forever. The warriors of Earth had kept their promise. They had protected the innocent, and they had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. The first time the galaxy heard from Earth, it was not through diplomacy or peaceful exploration. It was through blood, steel, and the kind of desperate fury that only comes when someone threatens what humans hold dear. Commander Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the tactical display with eyes that had seen too much war. The distress signal from the mining colony of New Geneva had been broadcasting for 72 hours straight. 72 hours of automated pleas for help growing weaker with each transmission. The raiders had hit them hard, and they were running out of time. Ma'am, we're receiving multiple contacts on long-range sensors, reported Lieutenant from the sensor station. His young face was pale, but his voice remained steady. Looks like a full battle group, 12 heavy cruisers, at least 30 destroyers, and... He paused, swallowing hard, 3 dreadnoughts. Felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. The Retribution was fast, heavily armed for her size, but she was just one ship. One human ship against an alien armada that had been terrorizing the outer colonies for months. The smart play would be to retreat, call for reinforcements, and come back with a proper fleet. But humans had never been particularly smart when their people were dying. Time to New Geneva, she asked, her voice cutting through the bridge chatter like a blade. At maximum burn, 18 hours, came the reply from navigation. The colony won't last 18 hours, muttered Doctor from the medical station. The ship's chief medical officer rarely spoke during tactical briefings, but when he did, people listened. The last transmission mentioned critical life support failures. They've got maybe 6 hours of air left. Studied the tactical display again. They were known for their methodical approach to warfare. They would strip a colony of everything valuable, then sell the survivors into slavery. It was efficient, profitable, and completely without honor. The galaxy had learned to accept it as the way of things. Pirates were pirates after all, and the universe was a big place. But the galaxy had never dealt with humans before. What do we know about battle doctrine? Asked. The young officer consulted his tactical manual, one of the few comprehensive guides to alien warfare that Earth's intelligence services had managed to compile. They prefer overwhelming force, ma'am. Standard formation is a defensive sphere with the dreadnoughts at the center and screening units in overlapping fields of fire. They're methodical, disciplined, and they don't take unnecessary risks. Which means they won't expect a single ship to attack them head-on, mused. She turned to her tactical officer, a grizzled veteran named who had cut his teeth fighting corporate security forces in the Belt Wars. What's our torpedo? 48 Mark VII plasma torpedoes, ma'am, plus the usual complement of missiles and point defense systems. Nodded slowly. The Mark VII was the latest in human military technology, a fusion-powered warhead capable of punching through the heaviest armor. Each torpedo carried the destructive power of a small nuclear device, and the Retribution carried enough firepower to level a small moon. But 48 torpedoes against an entire battle group, it should have been suicide. Ma'am, spoke up hesitantly, are we really going to attack? I mean, it's just us against all of them. Turned to look at her bridge crew, these young men and women who had volunteered to serve in humanity's first real military force. They were scared, she could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy hadn't learned yet. When push came to shove, when people they cared about were in danger, humans didn't calculate odds. They fought. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're engaging the enemy to buy time for reinforcements. Include all tactical data on formations and capabilities. Yes, ma'am. Should I request immediate backup? Shook her head. By the time backup arrives, New Geneva will be a graveyard. We're going in alone. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Outside the viewports, the stars wheeled slowly as the Retribution adjusted course toward the New Geneva system, toward a battle that every military manual said they couldn't win. I want you to prepare a special firing solution. We're going to hit them with everything we have all at once. No warnings, no demands for surrender. The moment we drop out of hyperspace, I want every torpedo tube loaded and ready to fire. Ma'am, if we fire our entire at once, we'll be defenseless afterward. There won't be an afterward if we don't make this first strike count. His voice was calm, matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather instead of planning what amounted to a suicide mission. The fight like accountants, everything calculated, everything measured. They'll expect us to probe their defenses, test their formations, maybe try to draw off some of their ships. What they won't expect, added Doctor quietly, is for someone to charge straight into their formation and start shooting. Smiled grimly. Exactly. We're going to teach the galaxy something about humans today. We don't retreat when our people are in danger. We don't calculate acceptable losses when children are dying. And we sure as hell don't let alien pirates think they can prey on human colonies without consequences. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. The crew worked with the efficiency that came from months of training and the desperation that came from knowing they might not live to see another day. Weapons were charged, armor was sealed, and emergency protocols were reviewed one final time. As they approached the edge of the New Geneva system, found herself thinking about the colony. 15,000 people, mostly families who had signed up for a new life among the stars. Engineers, farmers, teachers, children. People who had never hurt anyone, who just wanted to build something better for themselves and their families. They had picked the wrong species to prey upon. Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced the navigator. Settled into her command chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. In 30 seconds, we're going to drop into a system occupied by hostile forces. Our mission is simple. Protect the innocent and make the enemy pay for every life they've taken. Today, the galaxy is going to learn what it means to threaten humans. Today, we show them what we're made of. The hyperspace tunnel collapsed around them, and the Retribution burst back into normal space like an avenging angel. Ahead of them, the battle group hung in space like a cluster of deadly thorns, their ships dark and predatory against the... Contacts confirmed, reported. Full battle group as expected there. They're not moving, ma'am. I think we caught them by surprise. Smile was sharp as a blade. That's the last mistake they'll ever make. Fire everything. All tubes, all missiles. I want every torpedo we have in space in the next 10 seconds. The Retribution shuddered as her torpedo bays opened and unleashed hell upon the galaxy.